Thank you for your attendance this morning. This is about cybersecurity standards, a short webinar. And what we're often asked is, well, which one should I use? Which one should I confirm or comply with? So we're going to look at three, and the three most common ones, and try and answer that question. My name is Gerard Joyce. I'm a founder and director of calQrisk, and we'll talk about calQrisk in a moment. So today we're going to look at just some statistics to start with. If you weren't scared enough already, just a few statistics to scare you. And then we look at the 27001, which is probably the most popular cybersecurity standard on this side of the Atlantic, whereas in the US, NIST, which isn't a requirement standard as such. It's not something you certify against, but it is a well-structured standard. And then Cyber Essentials, which is something most popular in the UK, and which over 120,000 organizations have, including ourselves. But it's an essential part if you're bidding for any UK business, in government, UK government business. Okay. My third slide, always a quote. You should aim for high standards. You know, who aims for a B? I would say always aim for an A, and believe they're obtainable. And for those, I didn't know, but Buster Posey is an American baseball player. He's in his late 30s. Okay, who are we? I think from looking at the list, and I looked at it this morning, most of you would probably know us, so I'll keep this short. We see ourselves first and foremost, like many of you, as risk and compliance professionals. We try to keep our skills sharp on this industry by reading a lot about it, by being members of various organizations that you see here. But our main business is we make a GRC solution, and it's called calQrisk. We registered that as a business name because people start calling us calQrisk, but that was originally the name of the product. It's based in the cloud. It can be based in on your house. It can be based in your cloud, but basically it's a central repository for all your risk and compliance information. We also provide risk advisory service. This is something new we started about 9 months ago, and for those organizations who don't have their own in-house expertise, you know, it's a hotline if you wish, and we provide some training materials, templates for policies and guidance, newsletters. It's good. If you are interested, let me know. Today, I think I need to update this. It's more than 3,000 users. Certainly, I'm seeing numbers up in the high 5,000s, but our customers are basically in two sectors, I would say. Financial services organizations, and there's some credit unions to asset management, fund management, and then the non-profit sector, housing associations, charities, sporting organizations, and the public sector. So quite a breadth of users using the system. End of the ad, okay? The rest is about cybersecurity. And some statistics to, not to cheer you up, but to inform you and let you know this is serious stuff. Cyber criminality is probably more lucrative than drugs at this stage, and certainly easier to conduct remotely and be untouched. I looked for some statistics in different places, and this one I found interesting, that 45% of experts identified cyber threats or cyber incidents as the top cause of business disruption. That's interesting. You know, when you think of power loss or natural disasters, that cyber incidents are the top cause of disruptions. And when you look at what's called threat vectors, you know, the route, if you like, to attacking you, they say that misconfiguration is the top one. Now, I thought to put it in perspective, I'd show you the other top four, if you like, or the whole top five, because there's not a big gap between them. But it did surprise me that misconfiguration was at the top. Now, I know from looking at the attendance this morning that 85% of you are not IT people, which is great. I'm delighted with that. So you might say, is this because we got poor IT guys? No. Your IT our IT, everybody's IT has become more complex over the years. And it is very difficult for any one organization to have the full breadth of skills. And I would say that most organizations don't spend enough on educating and training their IT. A misconfiguration can happen easily, and it can happen out of ignorance and not knowing that they have to close that door, or it can happen because they're they haven't been trained, or they're too busy, whatever. But it's a worrying number. The others, and I'll just mention them here, the vulnerabilities in internally developed apps, and that's a scary one. If you're developing applications that are allowing the public access into systems, this is something we focused on 8 years ago and followed OWASP. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to be designing in security from day one into the application and get them pen tested. Zero-day vulnerabilities is when a vulnerability is announced and the bad guys immediately come up with an exploit, a method of exploiting that vulnerability. I'm surprised it's 30%, because I would have thought that the next one, the exploitation of known vulnerabilities that are 3, 6, 9 months old and not patched, I would have expected that to be much higher. There you go. And then the last one, the lateral movement, that's reference to if you give somebody access to your network, let's say like in the classic case, now a classic kind of reference, Target, an American retail store, give access to the air conditioning people to access the air conditioning units, but inadvertently, or because they weren't thinking, allowed the third-party company to move laterally in the network. That is, to see more than just the air conditioning units, to see other systems. The bad guys broke into the air conditioning company, used their credentials to break into Target, and that was the vector, if you like, of attack from the third party. Okay, so lots of routes into your information and your data. It is scary. And the idea of the standards is there's guidance out there to help you better protect yourself. Of course, we couldn't talk about statistics and not mention ransomware. And this is an interesting statistic that it affected 66% of organizations. Now, I tried to dig down on what they meant by affected. I think it's, not necessarily a successful attack. I think those who experienced an attack and maybe defended it successfully. But so that would explain the high number. But we are getting attacked. We see attacks nearly every day that we fend off. I'm sure you do as well. Interestingly, that only 8% of those who paid, and you might ask what percentage paid. Well, from my research, I think it's about 50%, which surprised me, because I don't think 50% would admit to having paid, but that's what some of the statistics at least are saying. But only 8% of those got their data back. So I'm thinking, why would you pay? I would pay a little bit more, making sure I have a clean backup somewhere that I can fall back on. The scary figure here is 39% said their data was irretrievable. Now, that's a question you need to be asking. If you're non-IT, you need to be asking the IT people if you're keeping a copy of the data off the network, and like how far back are you going? Are you going back a few weeks? Because how do you know the backup isn't corrupted? But yes, keep backups off the network, I would say. And the other statistic that I kind of picked up, and I could have listed 5 pages here, but that I alluded to it earlier, the noticeable increase in attacks via third parties. And that's because our networks now are not just inside our 4 walls. Since COVID, we're working at home. And then because complexity, we've outsourced a lot of stuff to third parties. So we're all dependent on third-party organizations. So if you consider our network now, it's at home, it's in the office, and it's in third parties. And the third parties may not be as good as you in protecting and keeping the bad guys out. Okay. That's setting the scene. So let's talk about the 27,001. And guys, if you have questions, and I see there is one in there, I just see. Beatrice, I would also have expected the zero-day exploits to be ranked much higher, as I know how hot the black market is and the highest bidders. Normally, governments and big corporations buy these in order to have a competitive advantage. Yeah, you expected the 0-day to be higher. I expected it to be lower, certainly lower than the existing ones, because I've seen other statistics to say that people are not patching. And it's kind of making it easy for the bad guys to find out which of the older exploits that they've know well and have exploited before are still available. But yeah, it is a scary figure at 30%. But not all of us would be susceptible maybe to the day zero virus. They're often a day zero vulnerability and therefore virus. So I still think it's high, but there you go. So 27,001. Full title: Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection, and Information Security Management System. Now, that strikes me as marketing had an influence in this. It's covering lots of bases. It's covering your information security, your cybersecurity, which for me is included in information security, and privacy protection. Well, I would expect information security as part of privacy protection as well. A key thing here is that this is a management system standard. And any of you who've got certification to any management system standard like 9001, 14,001, 45,001, 65,000, you will know a management system, what it looks like. And it's a requirement standard. So it can be, you can be certified against it, and you will find lots of shall, the use of the word shall in it, that you shall have certain things. We'll see in a moment. This has been around since about 2003 or 4. And is kind of the gold standard in Europe, certainly. But they recently updated, well, recently in October 2022, and not as significant an update as I thought they might make. But let's have a look. First of all, who's it for? In a word, I would say it's aimed at the IT people, which has probably been unfair. But Chief Information Security Officers, Cybersecurity Risk Analysts, Advisors, again, you have to have a certain IT or cybersecurity expertise. Information security consultants, you know, a framework for them, and risk managers in compliance and information security. And all of this, to my mind, is implying and indicating you need to have a little bit of IT knowledge. We'll see in a moment why. It's unfortunate because I think everybody in the organization needs to understand this stuff. So the structure is aligned with ISO's management system standard, what's called SR, Annex SL. It's a format that ISO have come up with for all management system standards. If you open 9001, you'll find these sections: context of the organization, leadership, planning. They're all the same. And why? It's so that if you have already certification to one or two of these standards, you have a certain structure in your management system. So the information security management system shouldn't be separate to that. It should be aligned with it. And by aligning the headings in the standard, it makes it easier to implement an information security management system into an existing management system. It's as simple as that, really. But the detail is in Annex A, where they've included an information security controls reference. Now, I'm going to put up an example for you here. And you'll see by the language what I mean, that you probably need to have a bit of IT knowledge to fully understand the text here. So if we're talking about classification of information, we all understand that, but then information shall be classified. Now, shall is a must. Okay, shall be classified according to the information security needs of the organization based on confidentiality, integrity, availability, and relevant interested party requirements. Now, that's, you could say, fairly high level. It's prescriptive in the sense that you have to classify the information, but it's not telling you how to classify it. And it's leaving it a lot of flexibility in there based on your own needs. The labeling of information, I won't read them all. You can read them in your own time, but the language is often at a very high level, and it's a requirement. You have to be able to demonstrate that you're doing this to get the certification. So what's new in the 27001? Well, they reduced the number of controls from 114 to 93, but in reality, they just merged them. To my opinion, they've merged some of the more detail into, let's say, a higher level one, and left you a little bit more flexibility as to how you might implement that. but they have added 11 new ones, and we'll look at those in a moment, because it's always instructive to see what has been added, because any of the existing stuff wasn't bad. Now, there's 3 removed, and I haven't found them, but and 23 renamed, but it's the 11 new ones that are probably of most interest. The other thing they've done is they've grouped them from 14 domains into 4, which probably makes a lot of sense. Certainly when you think of people, organizational, technological, and physical, try and think of another 10 would be difficult. So yeah, that's good. It brings focus, and I think that's a good evolution. So let's look at the new ones. Threat intelligence. Now I've got on my screen, I've got the detail behind that. So I'll read out what the detail behind that. Information relating to information security threats shall be collected and analyzed to produce threat intelligence. Okay, in English, what that is saying is you need to keep your ears open, your eyes open. You need to be reading and understanding what's happening. If you're a credit union and somebody else has had an attack, you need to understand, well, how did that happen, and could it happen to us? If you're a housing association, and again, somebody in your industry has had an attack, or there's several attacks happening, maybe there's a particular vector that's being used, be aware of what's happening in your sector, and make decisions as to whether you need to up your game or change anything. So it's basically stay alert. Information security for use of cloud services. Processes for acquisition, use, management, and exit from cloud services shall be established in accordance with the organization's information security requirements. I think this is just reflecting the fact that we're outsourcing. So like with a lot of the ISO standards requiring some documentation to show that you've considered the process and you've established a good structure for moving stuff to the cloud and indeed taking it back. ICT readiness, that's information and communications technology, often now replacing IT, because it's not just information, it's about the communications technology, the internet, voice, whatever. Well, ICT readiness shall be planned, implemented, maintained, and tested based on business continuity objectives and continuity requirements. That's business continuity by another word, saying you should do it, you should plan for it. Now, there's a whole other standard on business continuity, but in information security, it's that availability, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. No use having systems that are up and running if nobody can access them. So they have to be available. Physical security monitoring, that was always there, but they've only added the word continuous to that, to my mind. Continuous monitoring of the physical assets, I guess. Yes, people do break in. People do break in physically as well as logically into systems. Configuration management, including security configuration of hardware, software, services, shall be established, documented, implemented, monitored, and reviewed. We've always done this, I guess you would say, configuration management. It's just been raised to a higher level because systems have got more complicated, and I think it's reflecting that. Nearly there. Information deletion. Only keep the information for as long as you need it. Again, it's something we've known from GDPR as well. Why are you keeping this information? Is it just in case? Well, you shouldn't be anyway from a GDPR point of view, but also it's just filling up systems and possibly creating more work for you in the longer term. If it's beyond its useful life, why are you keeping it? Data masking, that is encryption. Encryption where you need it. Certainly sensitive information should be masked, and masked on screen as well, not just encrypted in the database, but such that you only people with the authorization can actually see it on screen. Data leakage prevention. Now, I would have said data leakage prevention was also in the what you were doing for years. Let's see what is new. At 12, data leakage prevention measures shall be applied to systems, networks, and any other devices that process, store, or transmit sensitive information. And I guess this is a reflection of one, the Internet of Things and devices that might connect to your network, their potential holes in your network that information can leak out through. I think that's what it's referring to. The fact that our network is no longer inside those four walls and secure, that we've it out in people's homes, we've it in third parties. We're attaching devices to our network that are effectively, that are connected to the internet and are therefore another connection to the network and possibly a badly secured door. So yeah, it's raising the, I suppose, the visibility, that monitoring activities. I think this is more important now, that you're monitoring and looking for any anomalous activity. There's so much activity on the network and you can't maybe follow every alert, but maybe if all of a sudden your servers are talking to a server in Hong Kong or St. Petersburg and you don't do any business with any companies outside of Ireland or England or the UK, maybe you should look into that. So be monitoring and look for unusual behavior. Web filtering is about managing what websites your users can actually access. For example, we have automatically locked down any gambling sites and a few others that kind of by default that people can't go to. But should you have allowed lists and deny lists? We used to call them black and white lists, but the PC words now are allow lists and deny lists, what people can access. Because again, your website might be well protected, but not all websites are protected, and maybe the bad guys have put honey traps or others on other websites that you might frequent. So, and secure coding, again, that's tipping the hat to application development and saying when you develop apps, make sure they're secure. But again, there's a whole standard, and I would point you to OWASP if you're developing apps that you're going to allow the public and customers access to. Okay, that's 27,001. We'll come back to it in a moment. Let's talk about NIST for a few moments. NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. It's American, and it came out originally in response to threats to national infrastructure. But they thought that was such a good idea, the framework, that they came up with a framework for everybody that allowed them to address cybersecurity in their own organizations. It was recently updated in February of this year to version 1.1. And knowing that this audience today is 85% non-technical, I would say this is the one you will readily understand. In their own language, they said this is for industry, for government agencies, and other organizations. Well, for me, that's for everybody, because it's regardless of your size or the sector you're in. And it allows you to, I think, understand the requirements and then decide what's appropriate for your organization. Let me show you. First of all, in the structure. It's organized into 6 functions, and previously it was 5. And those of you who might have seen some of my presentations last year, I was talking about identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And I added in govern. I added in under identify because I felt it was missing. I was delighted to see a 6th function added. These are all verbs, telling you got to govern, you got to identify, you got to protect, etc. But 6 functions. And the requirements are described as outcomes. And let's look at an example. Outcomes that need to be understood by not just the technical people, but by, I would say, 85% of you, the non-technical, if that's what you would describe yourselves. So I like the language in here because I think everybody can understand this. The organization's current cybersecurity risks are understood. English, and that's at the high level of identify. If I drill down a level into one of the, and I think there's 3 categories under there. Asset management is one, risk assessment and improvement are the other 2. So the outcome that you should aspire to is that assets, and that's data, hardware, software, systems, facilities, services, people, that enable the organization to achieve its objectives or purposes are identified and managed consistent with the relative importance to the organization's objectives and the risks and the organization's strategy. Again, that's English. You know, this is what you want. This is an outcome you want to have. And then down at the subcategory level, it breaks that down into, in this case, the asset management breaks down into, I think, about 5 subcategories. So inventories of software, services, and systems managed by the organization are maintained. Can you say that about your organization? And I think all of these, and this is just a few of the 122 or so at the lowest level, interesting, isn't it? Because it describes it as outcomes. And certainly if you're an organization that's dealing with patient data, to achieve those outcomes will be a little bit tougher than, I won't pick an organization, but certainly you can think of lots of organizations who are only dealing with very limited personal data, very limited sensitive data. So it can be tailored easily, and it's not prescriptive in the sense that it's telling you the areas. It's a framework, and it's telling you the outcomes you should be aiming for. So what's new in version 2? Well, they've juggled it up a bit. They've added in govern, but actually they haven't really added an awful lot. They've made 22 categories where they had 23. That's across the 6. What they've done is they had governance in bits and pieces, and they've brought it all into under the one function, which is good. They had 108 categories. That's down now to 106. Again, it's just a little bit of regrouping, but I certainly see a greater emphasis on integrating the cybersecurity into the business strategy. Now, put that in English. IT people need to understand the business as well as the operations people, because they need to be able to plan and make sure that their IT infrastructure, security is aligned with what the business is doing. If the business is planning to handle highly sensitive information, then IT need to know about that and need to address the security requirements appropriately. They need to be aligned. And you would say, well, don't we have that today? Isn't that what people do? You'd be surprised. There seem to be like 2 separate organizations, the IT and the business. So apologies to you IT people there. I'm sure it's not everybody, but there is a lot of non-alignment, shall we say. And this isn't new, but it's now, if you like, listed or mentioned in this too. I think across the board, I've seen managing the third parties and the supply chain, and sometimes called third party, sometimes supply chain, is now a key consideration. And I alluded to it earlier. Your organization, your footprint, if you like, is not just inside your 4 walls. It's in the homes, and it's in your third parties and possibly fourth parties. So you need to look, that's why supply chain, you need to look and see where's your information and where are the access points into your information. So that's gone up the level of I suppose, requirements. What I like about the NIST 2 is they have lots of references to other frameworks. So this isn't the framework to give you the detail on software development, but it'll give you pointers to where you can get that detail. It's quite well structured, and there's quite a lot of additional information if you need to drill down in a particular area, and it's all free. You know, it's great resource. They did add implementation examples. So if you're looking at, and I just see if I can move my screen here a little, that IDAM2 under identifying asset management, inventories of software, services, and systems managed by the organization are maintained. Then they give you 3 examples on how that might be done. And I say these are examples. And I know ISO are always careful about not giving examples, because people do what it says in the example and don't think about what's actually required. But I think this is helpful. I think this is very helpful, and this is throughout the document. Interesting thing, they added an improvement category to the identify function, but it applies to everything. And the improvement category, I would say, is, and again, those of you who've heard me speaking in the last year, how often have I said you need to have an attitude of continuous improvement? Don't ever feel the job is done. That, you know, and I use the rugby team to maybe it should be European athletics, and an athlete who will say, well, I did well, but I think I can do better. You know, a rugby team will say, yeah, we won the match, we won the championship, but there's areas where we need to improve. And as long as you have that attitude and aren't complacent, you will stay at the top. Once you think you're done, you start going backwards. Okay. And finally, Cyber Essentials. And this is a framework scheme. It was originally Cyber Essentials scheme that was introduced by the UK government. It's certainly backed by them. And it was to help organizations protect themselves against the most common threats. It's also a requirement if you want to bid for any business, UK government business. The first version came out in 24, so it's 10 years in evolution. And the last version, 3.1, was April of the last year. So let's have a look. I think, and I know it quite well because we comply with it. It applies to all organizations of any size, any sector. Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, it's to my mind, it's focusing on the core stuff. Let's have a look. What I mean by core stuff, because it's looking at your infrastructure. It's not telling you how to do incident management or business continuity or application development, or there isn't an overemphasis on having documented policies and procedures. Certainly, yes, there are some in there, but ISO tends to require a lot of policies and procedures to go with the requirements. And that's correct. This is, I would say, a very pragmatic and practical approach. Not overly documentation heavy. You still need to have the evidence. You still need to be able to show that you have these things. But it covers the IT infrastructure, and it probably goes deeper than some of the others in terms of the what and how you might do it. And if you want to go for Cyber Essentials Plus, so the Cyber Essentials, if I explain on this one, is like self-certification, and the Plus, an expert will want to see evidence, and we've done this virtually on your network, that you have these controls in place and that they're working. So it's about 35 high-level controls and 80 in the detail. And all of these are, I would say, at some level required by the other standards, but they're at a detail level, so they're not specifically called out in NIST or 27001. But they do, in Cyber Essentials, you do have access to a toolkit as well that will help you. If you're starting out in the journey, there is help there to help you get up to Cyber Essentials standard. Now, I thought, could I do a Venn diagram to show these and what they cover? It's difficult. I think I might do 3 columns in an Excel the next time and show what's in each and what's different. But NIST, and I think that's possibly about 210 now from my last look, has the most requirements. NIST covers incident management in greater depth than 27001. And if you want to do that in 27001, the family, there is a standard, I think it's 27035. So you'd need to do both for that overlap to be more complete. 27001 probably has, I'm going to say, 10 or 15 things that NIST doesn't have. And they're more around the documentation, very specific requirements for specific policies, procedures that you need to have. The Cyber Essentials, because it only focuses on the core infrastructure, I would say the overlap is greater, but in the other standards, it's leaving it up to you as to how you might secure that network. So I thought I'll try and answer the question, which standard do I need to have? Well, if you start with Cyber Essentials and focus on securing your systems, I think it's a good place to start, and that might be enough for you. And it depends on your organization, if you want to extend that to other areas like incident management and business continuity and the whole broad spectrum. I think NIST is a good framework because it describes the outcomes, and you can pick and choose, if you like, what is appropriate for your organization. You really can adapt it to the nature, scale, and size of your organization. 27001, I think if you need certification because you're bidding for certain contracts, it might be a requirement that you're certified to 27001. And that, in terms of achievement, if I was to put times on it, I would say 6 months for Cyber Essentials, 12 months for NIST, and 18 months for 27001. And you could do them in that order as well. Yes, you could do all three if you really need to, but I would say it really depends on your organization. I'm very slow to say what is appropriate for anybody, but have a look at them all. And I think NIST, for you non-IT people, I think you'll find the language very accessible. So I've spoken for about 35, and that was my objective, my limit, because I know there'll be questions. I hope I can answer some of them. Increasingly, I'm finding this subject very complex as well, and I can't keep up to everything either. Is configuration management the same as logical access management and monitoring? No, it's more. Think of it this way: if you're putting in a system, a server, there's a server software on that server, and in server software, it'll allow not just users access to data that might be attached to the server, but there's, shall we say, it's a bit like a house with about 10 doors. And depending whether there's an internet connection or email connection or different reasons for connecting to that server, configuration management is about locking up those doors that you're not using, turning them off. Configuration management is about changing default passwords for the system. It's about hardening the system such that you only enable those parts of it, those services on the server that you're using, and turn off or disable or remove the other services and things you're not using. And access control is part of that, but it goes beyond the access control. IT people will certainly know this. I think the question for non-IT people to ask IT people is if the server has been hardened. I mean, that would be one. It's not all configuration management, but it's where people have misconfigured or have not locked those doors that maybe they think they have, but there's a vulnerability, and if they're not aware of it, the bad guys might exploit it. I'm trying to stay non-technical, but think of it just as servers are complex systems, and when they're set up, they need to be locked down and turn off anything you're not using, and then the stuff that you are using, make sure only people who have the access rights and need can actually get in that door. So will PowerPoint be shared? Yes. If you've registered and you want to have registered, you will get an email from Mairead later today or tomorrow with a link to a recording and to the slides. Where can we download 27001? Well, you can buy 27001. ISO exists to make money. So that's in ISO. If you go iso.org, I think it is, the international standards, it'll cost you, depending on where you buy it, but probably of the order of €100. Many within the standards space would agree with me that all standards should be free. But yeah, it costs about €100. But certainly do download it. NIST. If you Google NIST, it's on a gov site in the US. NIST CSF Cybersecurity Framework. download that. There's very good material there. There's mapping to the old NIST. There is linking to other documents. Certainly a treasure trove of knowledge that you can access there, and it's all free. Michael, which of the three has the most commercial value, or does it depend on where your customers are located? That's a good question. I think if you're based in the UK and you're bidding for business in the UK, you'd need Cyber Essentials. Or if you're based in Ireland and bidding for business in the UK, anybody bidding for business in the UK, you're probably going to be asked, do you have Cyber Essentials? Now, if you have 27,001, that's probably good enough as well, because they'll say Cyber Essentials or some other recognizable standard. But commercial value, yeah, I can't answer that. I think you will know in your business. I think certain industries, certain tenders will specify that you have to be certified to a recognizable standard. Now, there is other things like SOC 2, and if you go to Amazon, we're on the Amazon Web Services platform, and they're certified to 27,001 and SOC 2 and to multiple standards. Now, I haven't gone into SOC 2, but it's standard. It's more of a independent auditors going in and giving their opinion. But the thing with those is that the scope can vary, so you need to be aware of the scope. Yeah, I think, Michael, I think if you're bidding for business, it'll probably tell you, if you look at the last 5 tenders, it's probably telling you the direction you need to go. Beatrice, would you say that poor change management controls would result in a cybersecurity event? Absolutely. Change management. We have a risk in our system that I wrote questions for some years ago, and I remember reading a whole book on change management, believe it or not. But I ended up with about 22 questions that I'd say haven't changed in 10 years about change management. And they're kind of some fundamental things, like don't do change management kind of the day before the end of the month at a busy time, right? So do it at a quiet time. If you're going to do change management on a production system, do it in a test environment first. You know, if you're going to do change management, involve the people that it's going to affect. Have a, it's often called the change advisory board, and it could be the management team. So if you're the person who's driving the project for change, you tell them and let them know and let them ask questions. There are certain things in change management that I would say things that never change, like always retain the ability to roll back. And we do this. I mean, when we do an update of the system, we stop the system, we make a backup, we implement the changes, and then we test them and make it available again. And we try to do that in the narrowest time frame. But before we do that, we've done that in a test environment. But if the backup, if the upgrade, which is probably, you know, best example of a change management upgrade to the new system, should fail for whatever reason, we can always go back to where we were at the beginning, always. And you'd be surprised how many companies risk it. I'm only making a small change. I know what I'm doing. No, follow the change management. And there's plenty of guidance out there, Beatrice, for change management. Because the cybersecurity event doesn't have to be an external one. It could be, you know, it could be caused by an internal misconfiguration as well. Or I mean, it could be malicious, but it could be also you do something that causes a corruption of the data. I saw one, I'll try not to give too much information out, but some years ago, many years ago, a system that was upgraded at the weekend and the upgrade failed and they hadn't fully tested it and they hadn't got support available because it was a Sunday and they hadn't told the company who sold them the software that they were doing an upgrade at the weekend. And they basically, by Wednesday, they had to go back to the start and reinstall everything. It took them to the following Friday to recover systems, and all because they didn't test the update. And one guy said to me, well, we knew what we were doing. And he said this after the event. Clearly there was something missing, but So look, don't get complacent. Follow your own change management rules, as well as social engineering. Result. Social engineering is a technique for gaining that like initial access. And I was at a seminar or conference recently in Galway where they said it was on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence that social engineering is involved in like 90% of all attacks, some form of social engineering. And it could be a phishing email, but somebody using an approach on humans and our curiosity as a species and our trusting of others. And this is exploited by would-be attackers by socially engineering us by whether it's on social media or whether it's on the email into the company, but that can be a route to get key information that they use then in an attack. Employees, humans are certainly, I think, the weakest link. Recently, we did an in-house scenario exercise in a cybersecurity attack. And the scenario we used was somebody getting an email from somebody that they would normally trust, but the subject matter was not something that they would normally deal with. But because they trusted the person, they clicked on the link. And 2 weeks later, it actually happened in the company that an email went round to about 10 people that came from somebody they trusted. And guess what? 2 of them clicked on it. Now, so it happened that the organization trapped that, but the IT guy said to the people, why did you click on the link? You know not to. And he said, I was just curious. Humans. Okay. Don't beat them up, but just teach them to do better. Okay. Okay, I think we've got all the questions and we're at 1:15, so I kind of always have said I wouldn't keep you longer than the 45 minutes. We like to keep these short because people like them short. But if you have other questions, always happy, email me. I often use questions as a starting point to do a bit of research and understand this thing. So I hope that was of some benefit to you. And I will just end by saying, stay safe. Bye-bye. Thank you.